When our belonging is at risk, it messes with our purpose. Why am I alive? So purpose follows belonging.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to talk about rejection, partly because I think for a lot of us, rejection is almost like physical pain, more than even just like a metaphor for, things being painful. And that's actually something that researchers have found when they've described how rejection, especially for young people, in their research, they found that it elicits some intense negative kind of an effect for them that is really comparative to physical pain. And the effect is actually heightened during adolescence by a lot of different pubertal neurobiological changes. That's what they say in the research. They talk about how social media driven social comparison really does impact kids in a way that actually elicits physical pain. And kids can't really, process it. When they don't make the team or they didn't get the part or they weren't invited to a party, they're not being dramatic when they kind of lay on the couch as if they're in physical pain, or when they, get into the car and don't act normal because they look like they're in physical pain. Genuinely, what research is showing is that something painful has actually happened to them. And as parents, we kind of expect our kids to rub some dirt on it. I'll just be honest, Dr. Kathy. When my kids experience rejection, I look at your book, Resilient Kids, and think, man, why is not my kid resilient? But what this research is showing is that they might actually have a different, I don't know, like outlook or engagement with the world than I had because of social media. Now, I want to jump into this topic and talk about it a little bit, but I want to lay a little bit of a groundwork maybe for us, because you talk about belonging in your book, Five to Thrive, and you really talk about it being that question of who wants me. When we look at belonging, we answer that question, who wants me? When I kind of understand this idea of rejection and how it strikes differently, understanding it from this perspective really makes me wonder if that need is different. Why do you think that the sting of rejection really hits disproportionately larger for kids right now in their, adolescent times than maybe it does for us as we're older, like adults? Why should we be more maybe sensitive or aware of rejection being a physical pain for kids today than it was maybe for us when we were younger, or even for us as adults now?
Yeah, those are fair questions, Wayne, because, the need of belonging, who wants me, has always been a need. You and I had it when we were the age of today's young people. So why is it different? Social media clearly is a huge reason there. They're being lied to, they're being manipulated, they're being used. They drank the Kool-Aid and they believe that it's about, comparison, popularity, a level of coolness on a scale of 1 to 10. And that certainly wasn't something that I think you and I, most likely dealt with. I also think that although it's always been true, I think it's extremely significant to know and understand now that belonging is connected to the other four of our core needs. Always been true. But I think in our day and age today, with the speed of culture, with the loudness of the culture, with the social media recognition that it's about perfection so often, it's about the number of likes, about the popularity and how long are you on a device and how many followers do you have there. But when our belonging is at risk, it messes with our purpose. Why am I alive? So purpose follows belonging. So belonging, who wants me, facilitates purpose. Our purpose is to love. Our purpose is to like. Our purpose is to serve. And then purpose arrives at competence. What do I do well? So again, if we don't have belonging, we don't have purpose, because we have no one to love and no one to like and no one to serve. And if we don't have purpose, we don't need to be good at anything. And then if I go back down the pyramid, for our listeners who understand, it's a 5-step pyramid, belonging in the middle, we go back down, and right below belonging, we have identity. Who am I? Well, now I'm rejected. Now I'm unwanted. Now I'm a loser. Now I'm confused. Now I'm angry. Now I'm alone. Now I don't know who I am, because I thought I was a ball player, but they've rejected me and they haven't invited me, onto the next team. And below identity, we have security. Who can I trust? Well, I can't trust myself because I blew it. I didn't make the team. And I can't trust, I thought those were my friends, and I thought my coaches were being honest when they said I was a really good player, but I didn't make the team. So the rejection of belonging is actually potentially feels like a rejection of everything.
I love that, Dr. Kathy. I think that's really helpful to understand just the way that belonging impacts and affects all of our core needs and how that relates to all of that. I think it kind of goes to something that you talk about a little bit in your book, Resilient Kids, where you talk about resilience really being a mindset, partly because the researchers in this study really highlighted how quickly kids fell into a pattern of blaming themselves when they'd feel or experience rejection. And what they noted is that oftentimes led to sadness or anger or resentment or even like reduced self-esteem for these kids. So I want to maybe ask you, what is the difference between a kid who kind of processes rejection and bounces back quickly and one who really like takes in that rejection and absorbs it almost as if it's part of who they are or their identity?
Another good question. What comes to mind is what you and I talk about often. We are finishing a book, and we write about this in this book, that it's best to have a thick identity, a broad identity, an identity where we have many pieces of ourselves, that we are creative with music, that we love creative writing, that, our grandpa loves us just for who we are, that we are, learning to play the piano, that we're going out for, baseball, that the bigger a picture of ourselves is, the greater the likelihood that one failure or one area of being discontent is not going to destroy us. It won't destroy our security. And again, security is, who can I trust? Can I trust myself to be making wise choices, putting myself out there in ways that I could be successful? Am I trusting my mom and dad to teach me and train me and to not allow me to sign up for something where I would actually be looking like a fool, if you will? Those things matter. And, having a lot of strengths, that's what I mean by a broad or a wide or a thick identity, knowing a lot of strengths so that when one fails us, we can rely on other things and we're not defined by just that one area. That becomes really dangerous. And the other thing that strikes me, and I wonder if you would agree, Wayne, it would be good experiences recovering readily on our own. Like if we have parents who always rescue us, parents who never let us have a struggle, right? And parents, when we do struggle, who panic and then clean up the mess for us, then we don't trust ourselves. And then we're always running to a mom and dad, a parent figure, if you will. But I think if our kids are allowed to walk through valleys, walk through them well, and we affirm them, man, I love that you handled that well. You didn't, break down. You didn't, whine and complain for days on end. You owned it. It was a negative experience. We get that, but you didn't let it define you. You went out the next day and played with your friends. I think those experiences of recovering readily, which is the definition of resiliency, I think become very, very important.
Dr. Kathy, as you were talking there, it made me think of just some situations that we have as parents, but then also I think just even as humans, where the things that we believe we're good at, we might experience failure in, and we kind of expect to bounce back. We expect our kids to bounce back. We look at them almost like, these are the things that they shouldn't have a challenge with, and now they're kind of experiencing a challenge in that. And John Stone Street, our friend over at the Colson Center, often talks about the weight of the moment. Sometimes the weight of rejection can feel like an important moment that really does pull us down. And I think it can pull us down harder if we get rejected in something that we believe we're really smart at, or we're good at, or it comes naturally to us. So I want you to kind of speak into that. How do we keep or guide our kids so that they can readily bounce back, so that we do give them space to struggle and fail and have hard times without it becoming like the moment that pulls them down, almost like it's the story that they believe in? I want to help our kids narrate a good and beautiful and true story that God is writing for them. But sometimes the moment becomes, the moment in the chapter, so to speak, becomes the whole book. It can feel like that for a kid. How do we guide our kids in those moments so that they don't become so pulled down by a moment that it becomes their whole narrative or their whole story?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Our reaction matters, right? Like, do we throw a fit? Do they see us yell at the coach? Do we complain in the whole car ride home from the game or from school? As school begins again and there are grades that are going to go home with our kids, do we, in the opinion of our children, overreact? Do they overhear, the husband and wife, the mom and the dad talking about something? What are we going to do with Junior? Do they all of a sudden discover that they're really, worrying you and that there might be really something wrong? So, man, for us to be very careful of our reaction, to be very careful of what we say, how we say it, who we say it to, whether or not our kids are there listening, I think is becoming really important. The timing of it all. Again, you and I probably have had experiences where we were allowed just the right amount of time to deal in the pity party, and then we were called out. There were maybe times when we weren't allowed to cry, but we needed to. We needed to process that. So the timing of it's important. I think, if you're raising a logic smart kid, Wayne, logic smart children, as you know, think with questions. They love it when the world makes sense. They love it when there's justice and fairness. I think I would keep a really close eye on self-smart kids who think internally and can just pull away from support systems and think that they can figure it out on their own, coupled with logic smart kids who want to figure it out on their own and have a great desire and actually a great ability to think cause effect, comparison, contrast. Man, if I wouldn't have done this, then this would have happened. Man, if I wouldn't have said it that way, then I wouldn't have been rejected. And they're just playing all the script back in their mind. I would be very careful of allowing logic smart and self-smart kids to have too much time alone. I don't think that would be healthy for them.
As Dr. Kathy and I talked today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 37. I'll begin reading at verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe that he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. This passage is an interesting time in the history of Israel. Joseph gets his dad's coat, really a coat from his father that is incredibly beautiful. That actually showed everyone that he was a favored son. And he gets thrown into this cistern. Now, the cistern was empty. There was dry. There was no water in it. And as he's experiencing this rejection from his brothers, he does it as someone who's really experienced a lot of favor in his life. We don't really know what Joseph does in the pit when he's been rejected by his brothers, but what we do know is what he responds and how he responds years later. He looks at this situation, this instance of being rejected, and he says, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good." Now, that's not a statement made by someone who skipped out on pain. It's a statement made by someone who really processed his way through it all. Researchers, as we read about today, note that there can be really an experience of physical injury when somebody experiences rejection. These disappointments can feel like brief setbacks for many of us, but they can actually feel a lot more painful for others. And it's important for us to take a step back and remember where Joseph was when his story began. It was in a pit, and probably with not only emotional pain, but physical pain. But this wasn't the end of Joseph's story, where maybe some might take it. And actually, probably some people in history did take rejection. This place of rejection was actually the beginning of Joseph's story. It's the place where everything else almost gets built on. This understanding of love and faith and quiet formation from these early years of his life end up building some tested fortitude and character that really guides him later on in life. It's something that holds him fast. And I think that's where we as parents can maybe find some encouragement or hope in the midst of this situation that we're finding right now in our cultural moment. Kids experience rejection more deeply, and what we're finding is partly because of the world of social media. In ordinary everyday life, before the pit comes, it's important for us to take a step and reinforce a child's identity, to help them have it be something that's settled, to understand where their belonging comes from, that it's secure in Christ. And because it's secure in Christ, they have an identity in Christ. And so whatever belonging they find from there really needs to be one that is resilient and reinforced in Christ. That resilience, that understanding of who they are is really going to guide them well as they experience dark times. And we have an incredible opportunity as parents to step into that and build that for our kids. I'm so glad you joined us today on the Celebrate Kids podcast in this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. Glad you're here, and we look forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.